Alright, hey everybody, this is Neil here, and we are on the final video of Copy Crash Course. And in this video, I'm going to wrap everything up, kind of touch on some things that, just want to make sure I hit on before we get out of here, and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started. So in this video, we're talking about building your process, finalizing your funnel, writing and revising your copy, actually getting pen to paper or finger to keyboard, and making it look pretty, graphics, things, good tips with that, and then honing your craft over time. Okay. All right, so the key to writing winning copy every time is sticking to the formula and process, right? I created a formula for myself in that sales letter template, right? And I also created a formula in the way that I go about, researching the market, and it's something that I do very similarly every time. The longer that I've done it, sometimes I can do it quicker. Sometimes I don't need to go, research everything online. I already can figure out who the competitors are and so forth. So, those steps go a little bit quicker. But there are certain steps that I never skip, and I always do every single time. And the key is to build a process that works for you. If you lined up, 20 different copywriters, they would all probably, go about putting their copy together in 20 different ways. It's all about creating something that works for you at the end of the day, because that's what matters. Okay. So what I'm going to do is just share with you my process, which I've kind of talked about throughout the course. You can build your process based on this or however you want. So as you can see in the beginning, I like to, the very first thing I want to do, excuse me, is break down the target market and the ideal customer. Once I know that, I'm now into the products, right? What are the unique selling positions? What are the key features? How do we stack up against the competition, et cetera, et cetera. Break down the main benefits of my solution or my client solution, right? Write it out, okay? Identify the big problem and the sub problems, right? Identify the hook, get that written out into a sentence or two, right? All of these go for me, this is the way I use it, onto 3x5 note cards, right? I also outline the funnel on a whiteboard, or excuse me, the sales letter on a whiteboard, and then I put the actual bullet points and key points onto different note cards that I can then use when I go to actually write the sales funnel, or excuse me, the sales copy. Before I do that, I'm going to finalize the sales funnel and the price points and everything that goes along with the whole entire promotion, so that the copy is going to match that. I don't want to write the copy to a price point that I haven't determined yet, right? So all that is done before I ever sit down and write the copy, okay? And again, like I said, whatever it is, you just want to write it all down. If you want to use a notebook, a pen, if you want to do it on your computer, that's fine. Personally, the reason I like note cards is because I can lay them out side by side, and I can see, okay, I can see the letter forming itself in the note cards, right? And that saves me a lot of trouble when I get to the end. Okay. The next thing, excuse me, is documenting it from start to finish, or excuse me, finalizing my funnel. Okay. And in this part, I actually open up a Word document and I will write everything out. I'll start with what's the pre-sale, if there is a pre-sale and a lead magnet. Okay. So what is it? What are we giving away? What's included? And what's the main hook for that? Then, what's the tripwire and the core offer? Everything that's included. So what are the deliverables? In the sales funnel, I don't worry about benefits. In the outline, I worry about deliverables, price points, and those types of things, right? So then I would, say front end offer, whatever it was, $97. If there's a commission for affiliates, I note that there as well. Here's what's included. You get videos, you get flyers, you get whatever it is, each item, itemize it, right? Because you're going to use that in your promotion to affiliates. You're also going to use it in your copy. So it's all going to help you. All you're doing, you see how I'm kind of building up myself up to writing the copy, right? Profit maximizer. So, and this is something else. If your goal, let's say for example, you're building a product launch that's whatever it is, it's a, excuse me, what's the word I'm looking for? Lead generator, or front end loss leader or something like that, right? What are you doing that for? Is it to sell your high-end service? So you want to build your funnel backwards, right? So if the thing that your ultimate goal is to sell your $2,000 SEO package, then you want to work backwards. So your content before that should lead up and educate them about SEO, and maybe just it gets to the point where they don't want to do it themselves, so they're willing to hire you, right? And your pre-sale content should lead up to your main content. So it should all be relevant to the next part. And the more relevant it is throughout your funnel, the more likely people are to go all the way through it. Okay. Follow-up plan. So if Are you going to email them? Are you going to send them a thank you email? Are you going to email them in a week, in a day, 3 weeks from now? What's your plan after the actual purchase has taken place? And what's your plan for non-buyers? If maybe, for example, if you have a webinar and people don't purchase on the webinar, can you follow up with them via email afterwards, right? Same thing with retargeting. You can retarget them on Facebook if they come to your sales page and don't buy. So you want to have a plan in place for all of these things, and you want to document that in a Word document, or whatever it is you Apple people use. Right. All right, cool. So notes on OTOs. All right, OTOs. I know a lot of people have trouble figuring out what to create as an OTO. One thing I will tell you is, if you don't put an OTO in place, you are leaving money on the table, because there is a percentage of people who will take you up on it. Okay. Now that percentage is directly related to how relevant it is to what they bought originally. Okay. If they bought a package about how to build a doghouse, and then the OTO is a package about how to build a birdhouse, they're probably not interested in birds. They like dogs, right? So a better OTO might be, now that you've built your doghouse, here's 10 tips to keeping your dog healthy for 15 years, or what I'm saying, whatever it is related. Okay. And it needs to be so that it's not necessary for the front end to work. Nobody wants to buy a product just to find out that they have to buy something else for that original purchase to work. It just needs to complement it. Okay. You see that top bullet point there. I won't claim that as my own. I actually learned that from Ben Atkins back at one of his events a couple years ago. Super smart copywriter. Automate, simplify, or scale is a very good rule of thumb for your OTO. Okay. Don't overdo it. Don't put 5 OTOs in there, and don't. You might be sitting there looking at the numbers, thinking, yeah, it's great. If they buy all this stuff, I can make $500 per customer. You got to think about the long term. If you piss people off, they're never going to buy anything from you again, right? You got to also remember, keep in mind all the people who bought your front end offer but don't take your OTO, right? So the more OTOs that you have, and you're sending them through hoops, and they're just trying to get their main product. Some people are just dead set; they're not going to buy anything else. That's just who they are, how they are, right? There's a percentage of people like that. There's also a percentage of people that will take you up on it as long as it's relevant. So you want to not upset either group, and the best way to do that is by having affordably priced, very relevant, and only 1 or 2 OTOs. Okay, downsells work fantastic. Why? Because it's a psychology, right? People don't like being upsold. They feel like they're being tricked, right? But when you downsell, it's simply a complimentary, like, hey, would you also like this thing for cheaper than you already bought? Another thing I'll point out that I didn't put a bullet point on about here, but keep in mind of the overall total purchase price, right? So if when they buy the front end and the OTO and everything else, the total price is like whatever, $100 or $200. You want to make sure that that's not out of the range that you deem that people will pay for these types of services or products, right? So, because that's what they're looking at. They're looking at, okay, well, I already got this thing for $100, and if I buy this other thing for $300, then my total is going to be $400. Can I do that, right? So you got to put yourself in the mind of the buyer, right? Make it easy. So I like to use round numbers. So let's say, for example, you're doing $27 front end, and you do $17 downsell. Now you got them just under $50, right? Or let's just say you do $50 front end like this one was, and your goal was to get it under 100. So then maybe you have 2 OTOs for $20 each, so you're at total of 90, or whatever the case is that you've deemed as a reasonable cap point. Okay, keep the long term in mind, definitely. All right, so doing the actual writing. Now that you've got everything done, you're armed, you're ready to go. You're going to sit down, you're going to write that copy and make it awesome. So here's some of my best practices for doing that. Okay, I like to outline it ahead of time, at least 1 day in advance. And when I say outline it, I mean you're like, okay, you already have a template, sure, but I outline the actual how I'm going to apply the template to whatever it is I'm writing the copy for. So I've got a general loose outline on my hook. I know what the benefits are. I usually do this on my whiteboard. Works well for me. When I've been on the road, I've done it in a notepad. It ends up being like 3 or 4 pages because I just kind of sketch it out, right? And I'll draw a little picture, check, 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 and then here are the main benefits I'm going to feature right there, and then I'll write a little squiggly mark and put an arrow that says, in this part I'm going to talk about this, and then in this part I'm going to talk about that, and in this part I'm going to talk about that. Just like you would do with any other document that you might have learned to write in school or whatever the case is, right? Because now when you go to sit down and write this, you've got an outline, you've got all your bullets, you've got everything, and all you really need to do is sort of fill in the blanks, right? Okay, so then when you actually sit down to write the copy, for one, you want to outline at least a day ahead of time, if not a couple days in advance. Because what you allow yourself to do is you allow yourself to marinate on that outline, and you're thinking about it, throughout whatever it is you're doing. And when you go to sit down and write it, it can just flow right out of you at that point. Versus you don't want to sit down and then, okay, I wrote my outline, now boom, let's go, right? I mean, some people that may work. For me, I like to give it time to marinate. That sort of helps me avoid that blank page staring feeling, right? Once you sit down to write the copy, turn off all distractions. Don't have your email, your Facebook, your phone, nothing. Just you're in a zone. All you're thinking about and all you're doing is writing this copy, right? Use a time and space where you're most effective. Okay, if you're not a morning person, don't plan on writing your copy early in the morning. If you don't stay up late, don't try and stay up late and write your copy. If you're whatever your sweet spot is, when you're feeling the best, your mind's at its peak state, use that, especially for space. Me personally, I'm somebody who, I get bothered by noise when I'm trying to write. So I go to my office, close the door, nobody around. I don't listen to music. I don't do anything except for write and think, right? And that's how I'm most effective. Review all your notes from your research right before you go back to writing. So you've got your outline, you've got everything, lay it all out, go back, remind yourself of the flow, remind yourself of what you're doing, and then just sit down and start to write. Now, something that's really helped me a lot is, a whole sales letter can seem daunting. But if you write one section at a time, take a break, stand up, walk around, whatever, and then break it up. And sometimes, I'll even go down, I'll write a section from the bottom before, because maybe I'm not ready to write the letter part just yet. So to get myself in gear, I start writing the what you get and the benefits and, stuff like that, and plugging those things in, maybe the closing statement, and the hook, and then I kind of fill in the middle, right? That's just what works for me. Everything that you write after each section, you want to reread it from the beginning. So if you are going from top to bottom, you want to read from top to bottom. Read from the top point of wherever you're at. So if you started further down and you're doing the bottom chunk, then just go back to the top of that chunk and reread it, right? Listen to it. Read it out loud if you have to. How does it sound? Does it flow? And then what I found that really helps me is, let's say I write the first section of my letter and I'm kind of getting stuck a little bit. Now I stop there. I just go back and read it through word for word. Don't skim it. Force yourself to read it. Read it word for word through, and then you kind of pick back up where it's at, and you can see where you were going and things like that can kind of, points where you can get stuck, right? After you're all complete, let it sit overnight and go back and read it the next day. You'll see things you'll that you didn't notice, or you'll think of things you can add. Don't overthink it. Don't put too much thought into it, because you'll change what you've already done. That's great, but you can spelling mistakes. For me, for example, I write in Photoshop, so Photoshop doesn't have spell check, right? So a lot of times that's just I find a lot of spelling errors. I have other people check it out for me to help me with that stuff, because when I'm writing, I'm not worried about spelling, right? Go back and read it fully the next day. Have somebody else read it for you if you can. Make changes as necessary, okay? The other thing is visual appeal. As I just mentioned, I write it into Photoshop. Now, what I will tell you is I'm not a Photoshop dude. I own it. I know how to do basic things, and so forth. And the reason I do it in there is because it allows me to move everything around the way that I want it, versus where Word can be very difficult. Also, if you write directly into something like Optimize Press, you're limited to the text, and you're limited to where you can place the text, especially if you don't do code. So with Photoshop, especially if you've already seen the sales letter template video, you'll notice that I write in a way that's very skinny, straight down the page, and so forth. And the other thing is, if you're working with a Photoshop person, a graphics person, like for the longest time, I had a guy who, I worked with him for a couple of years. He was great. I lost him this last year, so he just went on. He was, make more money doing other things, and I understand that. But long story short, what I would do is I would write it into Photoshop, just basic, black and white, nothing, and then I'd give it to him, and then I would say, okay, here's kind of what I envision for the top. Here's, can you bold these things here? Can you pimp out these headlines for me? Can you smooth the edges? And all those types of different things. So I've gone with it and I've gone without it, right? So I want to let you know it's not the end of the world if you don't have high quality graphics. The words are what's most important. I've seen sales letters with no graphics that have converted great, and I've seen sales letters where they clearly paid a bunch of money for graphics and it doesn't convert for crap, because it's all about the product, right? The offer, the proposition, the solution, the problem, and the benefits, and you're pointing out all that stuff. If you don't do all that adequately, then it doesn't matter how it looks, right? So you want to hire, if you do want to do graphics and you don't know how to do it, I recommend hiring a graphics person to create your visual representation, especially for the e-cover. If you're unfamiliar with how to go about that, you can find people that can do it on all types of outsourcing websites. A good source is the Wordform WSO if you're looking for internet marketing style e-box covers, e-box sets, and stuff like that. You can also buy, if you're a Photoshop person, you can buy I believe what are called actions, where it's like pre-existing. You just kind of go in there, plug in the colors and the info and stuff like that, right? Don't overdo it with your images, but use images where it's important to drive home key points, especially if you're demonstrating something like a software or tool or a theme or something like that, where you want to show the panel on the inside, and use logical where it's appropriate, right? But don't use a bunch of cheesy images all throughout your thing, showing a guy like wing, and here's an island, and things like that. So use it just as much as necessary, no more. Okay, like I said, don't overdo it. All right, so beyond that, I just want to talk a little bit about honing your craft ongoing, and some things you can do, okay? So study other people's copy in your market constantly. If you're new and upcoming, something that I did when I was first upcoming, is a great little trick that worked well for me, is I would go and screenshot sales letters that I wanted to model or learn from, so that I could read them later, and so that I could when I went to go actually do what I want to do. And eventually I built myself a whole little portfolio, or folder of all these different types of copy in the market, and then I could review them, and that kind of helped me build the template and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to do that. You could just read it and let it marinate and do that. But when you see good copy or things that you think, I'd like to model that, take a screenshot, save it for later. Okay. Be willing to fail and try again. All right. When I wrote my first sales letter, it converted terribly, right? And when I wrote my second sales letter, it did okay, right? It wasn't until my third sales letter that I actually hit reasonable numbers. And then even since then, I've had sales letters that flopped, right? When I say flop, doesn't mean that they didn't convert at all, just not where I would have hoped, right? But I don't give up on that. I don't let that get me down or bother me, and so forth. I learn from it, right? Learn from it, okay? Analyze it. Okay, if the copy didn't work, why? What is it that's standing out? What is missing? Or why wasn't it compelling enough, right? And learn from those things and improve it when you go to do the next one, okay? Reread everything that you write. If you write an email, read it before you send it out. If you write a sales page, read it before anybody else does. Reread everything, because not only will you pick up things that you could do better, you'll also see what you did good, and that'll continue to give you confidence. And as you read it, you're like, man, that really sounds good. It gives you more confidence in your ability to put it out there to the public, right? Watch everything. If you make a video, go back and watch the video you made, especially if it's a sales video, but even if it's content-based, because you can learn from how you sound to other people, right? Reverse engineer sales funnels whenever possible. So if you're on Facebook and people are running ads to you, click their ad. If it takes you to a squeeze page, opt in. See where that takes you. If you have the money, buy their product and see what their OTO is and how they're positioning that. All those things can help you get better when you go to do your own. Because you can say, okay, well, I saw that was working really well for that person, and you can even, depending on where the product's listed, go see what the conversion rates are and so forth, and then you can just model things that are already working for other people, right? Don't reinvent the wheel, okay? Final little tip, and this is just something that I've been doing for ever since I started copywriting. Read the copy of any advertisement you see, and see how quickly you can break down who they're targeting and why. I do it all the time. Sharpens my copy mind. If I hear a radio commercial, if I happen to see a TV commercial, which I go out of my way to avoid, but all I'm ever sitting there is processing. I do it at the supermarket. I do it, all over in my everyday life. Anytime I see an advertisement, I immediately start breaking down who they're targeting, why they're saying what they're saying, what they're potentially selling, and what their goal of their advertising is. All those things will hone and sort of sharpen your mind over time. And copywriting is something that builds on itself. And I want to reiterate that it's a skill. Once you have it, it doesn't go away, but you get better by continuously practicing it, right? Masterminding, talking to other people, studying, things like that. And as a marketer, that's what you should be doing anyway. So make sure you're consistently getting better, and don't be afraid to fall on your face a couple times and get back up. All right. I hope you enjoyed this course. I really wish you the best with your offers and your sales funnels and your copywriting. I really appreciate your feedback. If you want to shoot me any feedback, feel free to. There's an email address on this page for that. And make sure to put all the pertinent links and so forth. So that's it for me. I will see you on the live training and on the other side. Bye for now.